Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm so excited you could be here with me this week. I apologize for not being here last week. My daughter was sick and so had to take care of her and do the mom thing. But I am here and we are here and we are going to continue our talks about criminals who committed their crimes while wearing costumes or masks as it's October and it's about that time of the year. So, today's case does need a trigger warning as it is going to talk about severe sexual assault. I apologize prior, and I just like to let you all know what the case is going to be about so that if you are uncomfortable, you don't have to continue listening. Life is not always as it seems, and in recent years, with the onslaught of Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and things like that, all the worlds of social media, we have come to see families in ways that seem beyond perfect. But years ago, there was no social media. There was just your friends, families, and neighbors. These friends, families, and neighbors were just as bad as social media, honestly. And rumors would spread quickly without even the use of technology. Some people, however, easily kept their secrets a secret. Today's case, we will talk about such a person who seemed to have it all together and perfect, but that was as far from the truth as it could possibly be. Our case begins in 1925 with the birth of Edward Paisnel. Edward was born to a family of means. His parents were said to be wealthy landowners, and his childhood seemed very unremarkable from everything that we could find. Everything quickly changed for Edward when he was about 14 years old in 1939. This is when there was a scary turning point for not just Edward but other people of the world. This turning point opened everyone's eyes to how cruel and dark the world really could be. This is when Britain declared war on Germany. Being just 14 years old, Edward helped as he could with the efforts, but he quickly found himself in trouble with the law. He was arrested by German soldiers when he was stealing food and giving it to starving families. He was imprisoned for a month for this crime. Besides this one blemish on Edward's record, he was a squeaky clean guy. He became a repairman for a children's community home, and this is where he met the owner, who then became his wife. Her name was Joan. Joan and Edward lived together in the town of Jersey on the Channel Islands, and they lived a great life with their son and their two stepdaughters. The children of the group home knew Edward as Uncle Tom. Not really sure why he was Uncle Tom and not Uncle Ed or Eddie or whatever variation of Ed you could come up with, but it is what it is and it's what he went by. He would bring the children toys and treats, and at Christmas time he would dress up as Santa and celebrate the holidays with the children. Edward worked hard and he became a building contractor, and their life, for all intensive purposes, seemed perfect. It was said, however, that Edward suffered from low sex drive and that they did not have sex very often. He even may have had a mistress on the side that Joan was unaware of. Jersey was known for its woolen trade and cows. Jersey is smaller than Greater London region, at only 9 miles wide and 5 miles long. The tiny island is part of the sovereign state of the United Kingdom that sits in the channel between England and France. Its population in the 1950s was about 30,000 inhabitants, and people felt safe and secure in Jersey. That was until darkness struck in 1957. The darkness came in the form of a man who would become known as the Beast of Jersey. He came like a boogeyman in the night. He wore a horrific homemade mask and wig and chilled the community to its bone. The terror truly began in early 1957, when a man dressed in a long black coat with a scarf covering his face began to focus on bus stops. The first strike happened at a bus stop in Monte All'Abe, where a nurse was waiting for her bus to go to work when a man walked up, beat her over the head, wrapped a rope around her neck, and pulled her into a nearby field, where he assaulted her. He left her with severe injuries that required stitches, and she was taken to the hospital. She did survive her injuries physically. This was just the beginning, though, because in March of 1957, a 20-year-old woman was walking home from the bus stop near Trinity. She was again beaten over the head, pulled into a field, and assaulted. The pattern repeated when in July of 1959, a 31-year-old woman was attacked in the same manner in October. It repeated again when a 28-year-old woman at St. Martin's was also attacked. All victims, thankfully, lived and were able to give a full description of what their attacker looked like. He was described as around 5'6", mid-40s, had a strange Irish accent that they were most certainly sure was fake, and a musty smell to him. Police agreed that the same man had attacked them all, and this is when he became known by the press as the Beast of Jersey. The musty smell of this man became a signature, and soon the musty smell was not just stalking bus stops. He had changed his MO and started breaking into homes. February 14th of 1960, he climbed in the window of a home, entered the second floor, where he entered a 12-year-old boy's room, holding a flashlight to the boy's face to blind him. When the boy woke up, all he saw was a flashlight flooding his eyes. The man, who the boy was able to tell was wearing a mask, put a rope over the boy's neck, took him to a field nearby, assaulted him, and then brought him home and disappeared. Maybe breaking into homes came off as difficult, or maybe he liked the simplicity of things. But in March, a man pulled up to a bus stop at St. Berlaide. He told a woman there that he was a doctor and that he was going to pick up his wife and offered her a ride. In her mind, he seemed safe, and so she accepted. Once in the car, she did notice that he was wearing a long jacket, gloves, and a hat. She quickly realized the mistake she had made when she couldn't see his face. But for her, it was too late. He beat her, punching her in the head and the face, and tied her hands behind her back. He then led her out of the car into a field, assaulting her. He then led her back into the car, and they drove off. In an attempt to save herself, she jumped out of the moving vehicle and began to scream. The noise she was making made the man panic, and he drove off in fear of getting caught. The man was nothing if not an evolutionist. He evolved his MO multiple times, changing back and forth, but the most intricate attack came later the same month, when a 43-year-old mother and her 14-year-old daughter were woken up in the middle of the night to a phone call that was quickly hung up on the other end after being answered. They went back to bed, assuming it was just a wrong number, and soon the mother heard movement in the home. She went to go check on the sound. She turned the lights on, and they were quickly turned off. She realized in that moment that she was no longer alone and no longer safe. She did attempt to call the police and quickly realized that the phone had been disconnected. The man in the living room ran at her, demanding money, and threatened to kill her. A struggle began between the two of them, and this woke up her 14-year-old daughter. When the intruder saw the girl, he quickly turned his attention to the girl, allowing the mother to run away. The mother ran out of the home to the neighbor's house, where she called police. The neighbors joined her as they went back to the home to try to apprehend the suspect. By the time they returned home, unfortunately, the man had fled, leaving her daughter tied up and assaulted but alive. In April, another 14-year-old girl was targeted. When she saw him, she screamed so loud She woke up her parents, and this may have saved her from the attack that was looming. This pattern continued with an 8-year-old boy in July as he was taken and assaulted and then returned home. The man's eyes were firmly set on children at this point, and the police came to the conclusion that the man had to be local due to the frequencies of his attacks. Due to this, they began to interview anyone who had a record. The list of men narrowed to 13, and on that list was Edward Paisnel. The men were allowed to refuse to talk or give fingerprints, and they all did. The police then decided that the main suspect was a fisherman from the island who was described as strange. His name was Alphonse Le Gastalos. I may be pronouncing these names wrong, and I apologize. Once arrested, his name and picture were leaked to the press, and the police interviewed him for 14 hours. After the interview, they decided that he was not guilty of the assaults and abductions. Due to the fact that his information had been leaked, Alphonse had to move from Jersey to a different island chain called Ekeros. He lived there until 2012, when at the age of 97, he passed away. In 1961, the attacks began again, and this time they were only children. By April, 3 children had been attacked in their homes, and the police were no closer to finding the man responsible for the attacks than when they had started. They decided at that point that they needed help, and they called in Scotland Yard. Scotland Yard told the residents to be vigilant, to set up neighborhood watches, and to keep an eye on each other to keep each other safe. They did put out a description of the attacker, and the description follows that he was 40 to 45 years old, approximately 5'6" in height, with a medium build. He knew the island well, especially the East Coast, and he had a mustache but covered his face, either with a scarf or a mask during the attack. He wore a long, dark, musty coat, a hat, and a pair of gloves. He entered homes through bedroom windows using the moon as a light between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m., and he carried a torch. For those in America, it is a flashlight. That's what a torch is. With the police at a dead end, they were not sure what to do, but the attacker decided to take a few years off. This gave the residents in the area a sense of safety. People began to feel more free and let their guards down. Just out of the blue again, in April of 1963, a 9-year-old boy was attacked in the same way as the prior cases. In November, an 11-year-old boy would repeat the cycle. July and August of 1964, the cycle repeated again with a 10-year-old boy and an 11-year-old girl. Then, just as before, the attacker hid. People again began to lessen the neighborhood watches. They decided the attacks were over, and they let their guards down. This was until the police received a letter from the attacker. The letter came in 1966, and it read, "Dear Sir, I think that it is just the time to tell you that you are just wasting your time. As every time I have done what I always intended to do, and remember, it will not stop at this, but I will be fair to you and give you a chance. I have never had much out of this life, but I intend to get everything I can now. I have always wanted to do the perfect crime. I have done this, but this time let the moon shine very bright in September, because this time it must be perfect. Not 1, but 2. I'm not a maniac by a long shot, but I like to play with you people. You will hear from me before September, and I will give you all the clues, just to see if you can catch me. Yours very sincerely, wait and see. August, a 15-year-old girl was brutally assaulted in her home. But this attack was different. The girl's body was covered in long scratches that were perfectly dispersed in parallel lines, and after this attack, there were no more incidents for 4 years. August of 1970, a 14-year-old boy was attacked exactly the same as the girl in 1966. He told the police that the masked man spoke to him. He told him to stay quiet because if you don't, someone will harm your mother and father. When the boy's parents found him, he was disheveled and upset, and he wouldn't speak of what had happened to him. Eventually, he told them, and he was taken to the hospital, where an examination showed that he too had the same scratches down his torso that covered the girl 4 years prior. In addition, the boy told the police that the man had spiky black hair and was wearing a frightening mask. July 10th of 1971, everything would take a turn. Officers were conducting a night patrol when they stopped at a red light in the St. Helier district. Once at the stoplight, a red Morris car flew right by them, running the red light. The police instantly began pursuit on the car. The driver was trying everything to get away from the police. But in the chase, he was not paying full attention to where he was going. Driving on the opposite side of the road and into an embankment, he then drove on a footpath and eventually crashed into a hedge, coming to a stop in a nearby tomato field. This did not stop his pursuit, however, because after crashing, he then got out of the car and attempted to flee on foot. He ended up being tackled to the ground and arrested, and once he was in the car, they noticed a strong, musty smell coming from the man. Once they got him off the street and into the light, they saw his clothing and looked for the very first time at what he was truly wearing. He was wearing a long, dark coat with inch-long nails and screws stuck out of the collar, cuffs, and shoulders. These were what made the marks on the young girl and boy. When they emptied the man's pockets, they found a black flashlight with tape covering a majority of the glass, so only a pinprick of light would shine through. 2 pieces of cord that were used for tying up the victims, a wool cap, and duct tape. They searched the man's car, where they found a prickly wig and a homemade mask in the car. Once in custody, they identified the man as Edward Paisnel. They began to question him about his attire and mask. Edward stated that he had the mask and outfit because he was going to an orgy and didn't want anyone to recognize him. They then asked him about the screws in his clothing, and he said that it was in case he was attacked by someone who knew martial arts. He refused to talk about the mask and the wig, which had been worn that night, judging by the marks on his face. He was placed into custody while they searched his home. In the search of his home, they found an old musty room with old clothes, homemade wigs, and matching eyebrows in it. They found a camera and photographs of houses across the island. Investigators believed that he had been planning attacks for years and had many more lined up. When they asked Paisnel about the photographs, he told them he chose his victims years before the crimes. He knew specific details about their family and their homes, and he knew which windows to climb into on the night of the assaults. He also had a shrine to Satan, including an altar, a sword, and an extensive collection of books about black magic and the occult. On the 29th of November, 1971, it took 38 minutes for a jury to find him guilty of 13 counts of rape, indecent assault, and sodomy against 6 of his victims. He was sentenced to 30 years in Winchester Prison in the United Kingdom. But he was released in 1991 after 20 years served for good behavior. He did try to move back to Jersey, but due to the reign of terror that he had held for so many years, he was no longer welcome there. And instead, he moved to the Isle of Wight, and he died 3 years later from a heart attack in 1994. There were rumors that he may have assaulted children at the children's home that his wife ran, but there was no proof of this. Though he was only charged with 13 counts, it's believed that he assaulted many, many more people than the number who came forward. This man, though he did not kill anyone, took away a part of the adults and children that he attacked. He took away innocence from children who believed in the safety of their homes. He took away a feeling of safety in a whole community. And he was a cold and calculated man who chose his victims years in advance and did not care about anything else but what he wanted. There is nothing more horrific than an attack on children of any kind. I usually stay away from cases involving children for personal reasons. I am a mom, so it hits hard for me to see how people can treat children so poorly. But this one weighed on me. A man who supposedly had problems with his sex drive was able to assault people for years. Maybe there was a different underlying cause for his issues. This man was a wolf in sheep's clothing in the community, and he took advantage of the fact that people believed that he was in a perfect, wholesome marriage, and he was a perfect, wholesome man. No one would suspect the man who plays Santa at the community home to also be the man who is playing the boogeyman in the night. But that's all I have for today. That is my case. I am so thankful for all of you for being here and for supporting me on this journey. I know this case was a little bit tougher to talk about for me personally, and I'm sure it was tougher for you to hear about. But it's something that weighed on me a little bit. If you have any case suggestions or anything, please, by all means, feel free to comment below. Or I do have a Discord channel that is linked in my bio. Again, thank you all for being here, and I truly appreciate all of you. You all have a great day. Stay safe. Be amazing. Bye.